Bro, okay, no, I spent hours last night. Going through these fucking accounts, okay? I don't think any of these people are real.
It's bad now, but when you're scrolling and every single post is an AI generated piece of content and you can no longer tell fiction from reality, people will be clamoring for a solution. The internet will be mired in total illusion. The system itself that the state is using is failing. Their solution is going to be the central bank digital currency. The Bitcoiners' solution is going to be Web5.
It's not just demand for Bitcoin as money, but this is demand for Bitcoin as internet architecture.
That's what we're hoping to build, is a internet that cannot be censored, that cannot go down.
So those analogies about Bitcoin being a city in cyberspace are not just analogies.
Oh no, it's all happening for real.
So then does that almost call into question the idea of identity itself? Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out The Farm at Okefenokee. The Farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At The Farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage-nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the Farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate micro-villages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community. So we were talking on the phone the other day, and you gave me this wonderful breakdown of the history of the web. And it's been sequentially broken down into Web 1, 2, 3, 4, and now I guess we're headed towards 4 and 5, which we're going to talk about today. So before we get into defining Web 5, can you just walk us through the history? Like, what is Web 1, 2, 3, 4?
Absolutely. All the time, people ask me, well, what about Web 4, right? And so I'm really happy to go through this with the audience today and with you as well. When the internet was born, it was a series of computers connected to databases that was run by banks and universities. They collected massive amounts of data, and you could access that data on a terminal. Web 2 is when we started to have identity on the internet, where we actually had data that was tied to who we were, and we could log in. This would be Zynga, Facebook, even today, Uber, Lyft, anything that requires a login that we have control over, where we can read and we can write on these databases. Web 3 started with Bitcoin and continued with Ethereum, where we now have private keys that we can hold on to, where now we can actually own our identity on the web. And what I mean by that is when you sign in with your phone number, or if you sign in with your email account, you don't own that phone number or that email account. Both of those can be taken from you. You have really no control over what happens. You had that episode about SIM swapping not too long ago. And so it's very important for the internet of the future that we are able to actually own our identity, and holding your keys is a big part of that. Web 4 is where we communicate peer-to-peer over communication devices that do not need the internet as we know it today. So mesh networks, Internet of Things, all of these technologies are possible, but they're not promoted. There's no marketing teams that are putting millions of dollars into making us more free or more sovereign, right? And so a lot of the internet has been designed in a way where we have to go through these gatekeepers to be able to move information around. And Web4 breaks us free of that, because now I can have a device that pairs to my phone via Bluetooth, and it's a mesh network, and I can communicate to you without the internet or satellite or anything of that nature. Web5 is where we have a Bitcoin node. And that Bitcoin node connects to other Bitcoin nodes over these mesh networks. And the mesh networks are built out of voluntary clusters of connected individuals that want to connect to each other. And they don't necessarily connect to the whole web. We can get more into that. There's also 5 protocols that Jack Dorsey has created, and he's been funding that with TBD. And those protocols are really the foundation of Web5. Merging those 5 protocols with your Bitcoin node, communicating over peer-to-peer networks, that's the dream.
So we're in Web3, the current iteration of the internet.
Yep.
And you're saying Web4, if I'm understanding you correctly, is like the decentralization of the provisioning of internet. So instead of getting it from a centralized...
The internet service providers become decentralized in Web4. And then the internet itself becomes decentralized in Web5 because we are running servers that we call Bitcoin nodes.
Got it. Okay. So it's the provisioning of the internet itself gets you to Web4, and then the actual participants in that network owning their own data, interacting over these mesh networks is Web5.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And what does that world leave any room for centralized ISPs, or do those just go away?
Yeah, they can run Bitcoin nodes and route traffic over their Bitcoin nodes. The beauty of Bitcoin is that it's a voluntary system where those who contribute are able to receive and create value.
Mm-hmm.
And a long time ago, I listened to a podcast with Andreas Antonopoulos. And for the first time in my life, I heard the term the internet of money.
Mm-hmm.
And really that's what Web5, I believe, is it's the fulfillment of that concept, where it's not just Bitcoin the currency, it's actually Bitcoin the network. And I believe that Bitcoin needs its own network, its own internet, redesigned with our security and privacy in mind. Because if the internet goes down, Bitcoin is disrupted. That's really the bottleneck of Bitcoin currently. Long time ago, and if anyone's listening who was there, they'll remember when the AT&T buildings and all of the phone companies, the Bell Telephone buildings, that were housing all of the operators that would be, you'd call, hello operator, and they would be plugging in the plugs to get you connected.
Switchboard operators, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Those became the internet hubs when the internet first started. And so the way the internet started was with centralized locations that spread out from there, and then people connected those locations. The Bitcoin miners are the hub of this new internet. Bitcoin miners are already mining with large data centers. If we could connect them, we could then have a global internet built on the back of Bitcoin. All the physical infrastructure, and then spreading out to the individual nodes in everybody's homes.
Interesting. So do you see, when we say Web 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it sounds like we're talking about an evolutionary sequence. Do you see all the applications that exist on Web 3 today migrating to Web 5 over time?
Absolutely. Money goes where it's treated best. Same with data.
Okay, then what does that mean? I'm sensing that there's going to be another giant source of demand for Bitcoin built into this vision, that it's not just demand for Bitcoin as money, but this is demand for Bitcoin as internet architecture.
As a Bitcoiner myself, I am extremely passionate about Bitcoin having a closed loop system of trade and you know, it's acting as a currency, right? It needs circulation. And so with this new internet, one of the things I'm most excited about is the concept of being able to send traffic from my Bitcoin node to your Bitcoin node, and for there to be a microtransaction fee based in Satoshis, where if I send you a video, maybe it's, 10 Satoshis. If I send you an email, it's 1 Satoshi, and vice versa. If you send me data, and maybe you're spamming me, maybe you're sending me a email update, and that's great. Please send all of your emails to me. I want all the Satoshis I can get. And maybe there's someone else in this equation where I'm trying to get data to them, but you're in the middle. And my transaction can take that data, go through your node, drop a microtransaction, and then continue on to its destination. That would be the great incentivization of Web5. It would cause people who currently don't even think about running a node to seriously consider it if they were making a passive income for rerouting traffic to places that it otherwise wouldn't be able to go. And it would create a closed loop economy where people are no longer worried about selling their Bitcoin. In fact, now they're thinking, I need more Bitcoin so I can browse the web even more. I can send and receive even more data. And if this works as expected, people won't have to add much more Bitcoin into the system, however much they're using, as long as it's less than the traffic running through their node or coming to them, then they'll always have a little extra.
Interesting. This sounds like the unification of data and money in a way. That it sounds like all the flows of data in this Web5 vision have money attached to them or built into them. And
it does today as well. Yeah. Except you have to pay $75, $50, $150 every month, regardless of how much data you use. This would be a much more fair way to determine how much your internet bill would be based on your usage.
Because you could be a net importer or exporter.
That's right.
Technically. Or a router, I guess.
Yeah, you could be routing traffic.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay, you brought up Jack Dorsey. He's been a big player in this push towards Web5. And when we had our intro call, you showed me, I don't know if it's his website or someone else's website,
his website, yeah,
that showed a percentage of completion in these different areas that we are in moving toward Web5. Could you speak about that?
Absolutely. So Web5 is 85% complete. And what that means is that the protocols that make up this new internet built on Bitcoin, they are almost done. They've completed 2 of the protocols, and the rest are getting their finishing touches. And I'd love to walk through each one of those. The first one would be DIDs. Obviously, I'm wearing a mask right now, a helmet, right? And it's to protect my identity. When I go to the Bitcoin conference, I like to go as a normal guy. I'm not looking for fame, so I don't wear the helmet. People don't recognize me. When I go on shows or interviews, I wear the helmet because it actually protects my privacy and my security as a Bitcoiner. As we all know, if you hold Bitcoin on long enough of a timeline, you're going to be targeted in some fashion, whether it's with a hacker or some other type of threat. And I believe it's very important for everyone to be able to take their privacy into their own hands. And that's what decentralized identifiers allow you to do. Decentralized identifiers allow you to create an online identity that is not tied to anything in your real life identity. So rather than a fingerprint or some form of ID card, you can create self-sovereign identities, SSIs, and you are able to move through the internet building reputation with these decentralized identities And it allows you the freedom to truly express yourself and be who you are, because you can also have multiple decentralized identities. You can have your church identity, your work identity. That's very important for me. You can have the identity that you use for when you buy things online. You can have the identity for when you go to public events. This would allow us to really take control of our identity in a way that we don't have that today. With facial recognition, with all of the ways that we're tracked, we don't have control over what people can see or our self-expression.
Okay, so Bitcoin's already significantly disruptive to the state, and that it, over the long run, takes away the money printer, right, as a revenue option. Also gives people this kind of hyper portable, hyper concealable form of purchasing power or money, which is obviously good for the individual and their contentions with the state. But now you're describing another thing that I haven't thought too much about: identification, which is something the state obviously administers for a lot of people. But you're saying that can now be done in a non-state technological way, a decentralized way, effectively. What are the implications of that?
Yeah, so they're big, obviously, right? What Bitcoin did for our money, I believe Web5 will do the same for our data and our identity. And it's necessary, because the world that we're in today is not the same world that we were in 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It used to be that your social security number was pretty much safe unless you did something stupid, right? Just today, I saw a news headline where every social security number has now been leaked online of every American, billions of social security numbers. So the system itself that the state is using is failing, and they're looking for a solution. Their solution is going to be the central bank digital currency. The Bitcoiner solution is going to be Web5. And if Bitcoin can't compete with the central bank digital currency, then they already won.
Wow. So the fork in the road is here, and one fork leads towards central bank digital currency plus social credit scoring system.
That's right.
The other fork is decentralized identifiers and Bitcoin, basically.
Yeah. And on top of that, we're very privileged here in America, right? I can go down to the bank and I can show an ID card and get a bank account, and we have all kinds of privileges. Around the world, people don't have the same privileges, and it's even harder for them to get an identity or an ID because it has to be given by either a banking institution, or it needs to be validated by a government entity. So the ability to create your own identity and build verifiable reputation on that identity, that is something that will change the world, because there are so many people that are not in the equation currently because they can't prove where they live. They don't have all the privileges, as I said, that we have living in an industrialized society.
It starts to make my head spin a little bit, because you won't even have your one ID that you use for everything. Like you said, you'll have multiple. So then does that almost call into question the idea of identity itself? Like, will you even have?
Yeah, I mean,
I guess we'll still have first names, right? We'll still have first names, last names, presumably. But
whatever you want to identify as, and that's actually a pretty in vogue concept right now. People like dead names. They like to identify in different ways. I say, sure, you can identify however you want, and that is the beauty of what Jack is building with the DIDs.
And the anonymity is obviously off the charts, right? Because you can just spin up a new identity for any activity that you're looking to engage in.
However, it would be extremely difficult to build reputation that would be bankable or...
So reputation starts to become more at a premium.
That's right, yep. Attending an event and having other people being able to verify that you were there, huge. That's a big deal. The scammer most likely is not going to have access to that.
Right.
They're going to either be trying to buy other people's DIDs, which would be difficult because all of this is, again, taking place on the Bitcoin node. Why would you give your Bitcoin node to anybody else, right? So every system has its weak points.
Mm-hmm.
However, this solves a lot more problems than it creates. And we may still have some of the issues in this system that we have in our current system, but at least we'll have, as you said, more anonymity, more privacy. I would like to make the distinction for the audience and whoever's listening that anonymity is people knowing what you're doing, but not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And privacy is people knowing who you are, but not what you're doing.
Mm.
And there are times where you want privacy and there are times where you want anonymity. And the truth is that almost nothing is private today, right? I mean, everything is tracked, traced. I am just leaking data points every single day. And there's a dust cloud of data points around me. So this doesn't make it any harder for the state to catch the bad guys doing bad things. They already have all the data.
Mm-hmm.
This protects us from the bad guys.
Wow, super interesting. So you said that Web5 is 85% complete per Jack Dorsey's website.
Yep.
But then when I'm looking at, I assume obviously Web4 is a prerequisite to Web5 because you needed the decentralized internet provisioning or the mesh networks prior to Web5 being functional. I don't see mesh networks very prevalent in the world today. I don't see them anywhere, frankly. So could you, is that the 15% that's missing, or like what's going on with mesh networks?
Well, to be clear, Jack Dorsey has a different definition of Web5 than we do. There is a little bit of a difference there, and there's actually a difference all over the world. If you go to the Asian countries, their concept of Web5 is very much an internet that can't go down. If you come here to America, you're going to hear people talk about Web5, and it has some American ideals baked into it of being able to own your property. And so the truth is that there is not a commonly accepted definition across the board. Jack Dorsey doesn't recognize Web4 as even being part of the equation. We do. They would say that Web5 is Web2 plus Web3.
Okay.
And we don't disagree with that. But we do believe that there is more decentralization that needs to take place, and there is a place for Web4 there once we have enough Bitcoin nodes out and about. That's really, you'll understand this because of the phrase gradually, then suddenly. And so we believe that Web5 is going to stay underground, it's going to be uncommon, and then suddenly it's going to be everywhere. And in the last 2 years, I've seen that. I've been talking to people about Web5 since late 2022. And Jack Dorsey did announce in 2022 at South by Southwest the concept of Web5. And so not very many people, including myself, paid attention. Just like Bitcoin, for the first couple years, couple months, I didn't really pay much attention to it. Everyone comes to Bitcoin as a skeptic. Everyone comes to Web5 as a skeptic. However, what it can do is so profound. And in the last year, we've seen examples of where it would have been really nice to have an internet that can't go down, right? We've seen AT&T go down. We saw the CrowdStrike incident, many cyber attacks, ransomware attacks all over the world. And with AI, it's only going to get worse. So in my opinion, Web5 is inevitable simply because we are evolving, and the internet also needs to evolve with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the theme here with a lot of these network technologies is you want something that's very robust or anti-fragile.
Right.
And then something that is highly usable and accessible, right? So it won't go down. You can always get to it, and it always works.
Yep.
That's one of the amazing things about Bitcoin is like it is that for money, but we also need that. Bitcoin depends on the internet, so we would also need an internet that's equally robust in that way. I'm surprised Jack Dorsey is not advocating for the decentralized provisioning of internet. It seems like that would be That's something that's somewhat obvious to this vision.
The amazing thing is with the protocols that Jack is creating, we would be able to utilize those protocols to build this mesh network internet that I'm speaking about. I think they're doing so much work currently with the identity that it's okay if we take on the reins for the mesh networks. That's really our heart, is we want to see an internet that can't go down, because right now people are surviving off the internet. If the internet went down, goodbye medications, goodbye paying your electric bill, goodbye figuring out where to get food. I mean, really, the entire society has become accustomed to relying on these third-party connections and to live. I mean, we pay all of our bills, at least I do, through the internet. So it is something that's important, but it couldn't happen without the protocols for Web5. And one of the protocols I'd like to highlight is the Verifiable Credentials. This is something I'm very excited about personally. Imagine you have a wallet on your device and it's holding identity records, it's holding your DID. It can also hold something called a verifiable credential. And to give you a real life use case, when you go to the store, if you want to buy a case of beer, you have to hand over an identity card that has your name, your middle name, your date of birth, your weight, your address, a picture of what you look like, your eye color. I mean, you're giving that person everything they need to stalk you, right? Imagine if you could go to the counter and simply show them your age, and it's verifiable. They don't need to see everything else. Almost like a zero knowledge proof for your identity. Let's take another example with the verifiable credentials. My organization hires somebody and we create a verifiable credential that is attached to their decentralized identity. And now they can verify to a bank that they have employment. And if they need to, they can show that bank how much they're being paid. And because the verifiable credential can be changed by the issuer, if they're no longer an employee, we can revoke that verifiable credential. So now you have the ability for plane tickets, for titles, house titles, car titles, all kinds of verification metrics that are needed for society to function. And it can be self-owned and secure.
Does that still ground out in state-issued titles and age verifications, though? Because there has to be some arbiter of that truth, right? At bottom.
Absolutely. And that's where your data comes in. One thing that you can't escape is your digital footprint. And if the government can give credence to your digital footprint, then why wouldn't everyone accept it everywhere? And so that is one of the challenges, is to get the states, the governments, the banks, all the organizations to trust these verifiable credentials and decentralized identifiers. But if you have all of the data to support it, it becomes more verifiable than the ID card that I can buy off the internet and open a bank account.
Interesting. So then we have Bitcoin, the money, and then Bitcoin, the network. And they now kind of functioning as two different things in this world. You gave me an analogy about a city on our call. Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So with these mesh networks, with this new internet, no one can be censored. Today, right now, we have really no free speech on the internet. Every account that we have is owned by a third party, and that third party can censor us or remove what we say at no cost to them, based on a whim, without any due process. With Web4, because it's a mesh network of Bitcoin nodes, if someone stopped receiving traffic, let's say they had a power outage, that's okay. You can still get traffic through different nodes to your destination. Kind of like a city. If one road is closed, there's still another way to get there. they would have to close many roads to prevent your speech from being able to go out into the new web. And that's what we're hoping to build, is a internet that cannot be censored, that cannot go down.
So those analogies about Bitcoin being a city in cyberspace are not just analogies.
Oh no, it's all happening for real. The things that we heard early on, I got in 2016 and started learning about Bitcoin, and all of the ideas about citadels and what the future of Bitcoin could look like, I believe that really will take place.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah.
What is this God and Bitcoin on the outline? I don't recall us talking about this, but you said whose face is on that coin. What do you mean?
Yeah.
What is the connection there?
So I'm very spiritual myself.
Wow.
I definitely believe in God, and there are stories in the Bible where, if anyone is listening, you're familiar. There's one story where Jesus is flipping tables in a temple. And specifically, the tables belonged to money changers. And a lot of people, including myself, grew up thinking, well, it's because they were doing business in a place of worship. That's what angered Jesus. I've come to the conclusion that it was actually something different that was really bothering Christ at that time. And it was very similar to what we have today. And I'll go deeper into that. Originally, the temple should have had images on the coins, on the shekels, that had a menorah or other imagery. And when Christ appeared, there were faces of Caesar printed on the temple coins. And so the religious leaders of that time came to Christ and said, who should we pay taxes to? If he said Caesar, then he would have been a heretic. If he said God, then he would have been in violation of Roman law. So Christ revealed what it was that they had done, which is switched the currency from something that had real value and a fixed asset, right, to something that had inflation attached to it and was issued by Caesar at that time. So Christ said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God's what is God's, revealing that there was nothing of God's in that temple, right? It all belonged to Caesar. And I believe what angered Christ was that inflation was in the temple through these coins, through false money. No matter how hard people worked, they had to work harder every year to be able to account for their sins. They were blocking people from heaven financially. And I believe that is the same thing that is happening today. We have all kinds of faces on our money. But Bitcoin is the only form of money that I'm aware of that doesn't have the face of Caesar or anybody on it. There's no bank. There's no government. There's no one to fail. There's no one to jail. It's truly a system of accounting that is fair to all. And that, I believe, is also what Web5 will bring, because we have open source money. Now we have open source internet.
Wow. It's fascinating. Yeah, I've often thought it was telling, and there's a lot of, I guess, controversy surrounding the motivation of Jesus to flip those tables.
Right.
But it is certainly telling that he only got physically violent once.
Yeah, that we can see. Yeah.
You know, forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. This is a vision right now.
Right.
Could you just start painting the picture of what the actual user experience is going to be like in the world of Web5? Like, how are people actually interacting with this thing? How much has the outside world changed as a result? I mean, I would assume this is going to affect everything, right? Like the 9-to-5 job and probably institutional realities, et cetera. Like, what does that world actually look like?
Well, we could probably talk forever about that, but I can give you a little bit of the vision that I have for what Web5 will look like. Have you ever used Tor, the Tor browser?
Yeah.
I imagine that interfacing with this internet on Bitcoin, all of the Bitcoin nodes connected to each other, it would function very much like Tor. It would be a separate browser. And if we agree that the central bank digital currency is coming and they're going to force everyone to pay for their internet service with a facial scan or something of that nature, fingerprint, the access to the internet will be very controlled. And even harder for the average person to interface with than it is today. It may be more expensive. There may be more restrictions placed on it. You've posted too many times today, right? You can use AI, but only if it has this much hash power. If it's over this much hash power, that's too strong of an AI for you to use. All these control mechanisms placed into the internet. And we see that there are laws coming about that will restrict our access. And so with Web5, it would be truly a new internet. It would be compatible with the old one where I could still visit my old websites, but there would be new protocols baked into the browser. And for those who are listening who are technical, one of the goals is to get rid of the DNS. The DNS, the domain name service, is the great bottleneck of the internet. You have to register your domain with a third party that you don't have any control over. You don't actually own that domain. After a year, it goes back to the company, right? And the DNS is a collection of servers around the world. It's extremely centralized. And so how can we decentralize that part of the internet? It will be by using another web browser, another wallet to hold these identity verification tokens, verifiable credentials, things of that nature. There aren't any tokens that I'm aware of on Web5, whether it be Ethereum or other cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin really is the money of the internet for Web5. And that it solves every issue that we need. And to speak on that even more, I'm not necessarily a Bitcoin maximalist in the sense where I think Bitcoin is somehow different than cryptocurrency. It's all protected by cryptography, right? I do believe that Bitcoin is unique in that it has a network that we can build on that no other coin or technology has. It has a physical network that's sufficiently decentralized where if we were able to connect the nodes, we actually have a chance at building this new internet. And that is the value that I think that Bitcoin brings. And that's why I believe that Bitcoin will take all the functionality of every different type of technology that we've seen in Web3 and bring it to Bitcoin. Well, kind of like Bitcoin's at a poker table and just taking all the chips and taking the jackpot onto its side of the table. I believe that whatever functionality you would like to see, whether it's file storage, whether it's DeFi, things of that nature, it will happen node to node, peer to peer on Bitcoin, the network. And Bitcoin, for that reason, will become infinitely more valuable than it is today.
And what does that do then to traditional finance? Like, does this really just start to eclipse all of these legacy institutions?
I mean, I think in a free market, you have many different forms of currency.
Okay.
I mean, very early on in America, we had 800 different currencies, and one of them won. If Bitcoin was the only currency, that would be very centralized. That'd be concerning to me. If Bitcoin was the money for the internet, that is a right place for Bitcoin. Bitcoin was designed for the internet, from the internet, right? And so Bitcoin does really well in that sense. I think we'll still have gold and silver. We'll still have money. I think the banks will end up running nodes, right? If your node becomes extremely valuable, you'll probably want to keep your node in a vault. There's a lot of bank vaults out there. There's a lot of safety deposit boxes out there. This very well could be how people are able to add additional security to their digital footprint on Bitcoin.
Interesting. So what do, like, we're accustomed to the application layer in Web3 as being websites mostly.
Right.
I guess apps too are now part of that.
Yep.
What does the web app ecosystem look like in Web5? Is it different than what we're accustomed to now?
It is very different, yes. So rather than having a centralized server that hosts a website and you visit it on your computer, you would run apps on your Bitcoin node. And other people who are running similar apps will be able to communicate through these apps while still retaining ownership of your data. The other thing is there are some companies out there, I won't say the name, they've done a really good job at making their app store a walled garden. You have to submit all kinds of applications and they take 30% of whatever value takes place over your app, right? That is a problem of centralization. And with a decentralized application layer on Bitcoin, you can create your own app, put it onto your node, and then share that app with anybody else who would like to run it. And now you have an application layer that is fair, equitable. It's no longer a server-client relationship where there's some really powerful computer and you're just there with a laptop and that computer is running 5 times faster than you are. And it's running all kinds of analytics. It's running all kinds of surveillance technology to extract as much data from you as possible. Now, you and I can use an app and share videos with each other over Web5, and it's private and secure. There is no centralized location that we have to refer to in order to use these decentralized apps. That is something I'm very excited about because in Web3, we do have decentralized apps, but almost always they still rely on Web2 architecture. There's still some server and some DNS link, some domain name that is involved in all of this, and it creates a Achilles heel for these apps. One of the things that Bitcoin will change with Web5 is instead of us accessing apps that hold our data that is held on a third-party server, we will run our own apps that hold our data on our Bitcoin node, increasing the value of your Bitcoin node. Another part of this is tying your data to the Bitcoin blockchain. Right now, we have a way of doing that I'm not extremely fond of with ordinals, but I believe that the concept is sound as far as Bitcoin is a really great time chain. If you have a child, you know which block that child was born in. That's a really great birth certificate, right? That you can have verifiable events that take place, and as long as you're not gumming up the blockchain with unnecessary transactions, I think it's a fantastic idea to be able to hold that data on your node, tied to a point in time on chain that everyone can verify. It's one of the reasons why you would want your Bitcoin node running at all times, so you can present the verification at all times. And also, I know that TBD, Jack Dorsey's company, is building applications that are serverless. And I'll leave that on the table now because they're doing some great work there. And anyone who's technical, you can dig into the weeds on that. There's some exciting stuff. There are other organizations too. Nostr is a protocol that is taking on some of these functionalities. And we can see a clear view of how a new web can be born just from the Nostr protocols. There's Fediverse, the Fedi Bravo app, and the Fedi communities. Incredible, research those. There's all kinds of technology being built right now that do these things. And we're not sure which one is going to win. But we know that we won't be able to escape the walled gardens unless we have decentralized apps.
Interesting. So it's no longer, you're not interacting with an app that is sent from the top down, but everyone's just sort of choosing to run their own apps and then networking together mesh style. Basically.
That's right. The mesh is not always necessary.
Yeah.
If you're using, your fiber connection, that's fine. The important thing is that if that connection were to go down for whatever reason, that you're still able to communicate. We don't need everything to run through mesh networks all the time exclusively, but we have to have the ability to stay connected when those centralized providers fail.
Yeah, networks need to be robust for sure. So there's this quote, something like the future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
That's a great quote.
And you just said something offline that triggered that for me, is that this technology that we're talking about already exists. It's just not deployed yet.
Yeah.
For the most part. And then you said something else too that I want you to elaborate on if you could, that in this Web5 vision that network participants, us, actually become the internet.
That's right.
Could you expand upon that too?
So right now on the internet, I can own a laptop and I can browse the internet, which is transmission lines owned by somebody else. And I can access websites that are hosted on servers that somebody else owns. And I even have a cloud that holds all my data that is basically just someone else's computer. And so with Web5, the revolutionary thing is that all of those things come home. I own the hardware, I own the software, and the data with no user agreements. Bitcoin was open source. Is open source. And Web5 will also be open source. It's a very big component into this ecosystem because without ownership, you really don't have identity. And that's one of the benefits to actually owning the hardware. A lot of people would say, well, the internet works well. Why do I need to own the Starlink connection? Why do I need to own the transmission lines? And I would say that it's important to own that because then you have an internet that can't go down. One example is we actually make a mobile Bitcoin node. It's a lunchbox that houses a Bitcoin node and a private cloud with movies, chat communication. It's basically Dropbox plus a Zoom in one. And it also has mesh networking devices that allow you to communicate off grid. And so really this becoming the internet, you can actually own the infrastructure and connect to other people who own their infrastructure. and now you're truly sovereign digitally.
Hmm. Wow. So that's interesting because obviously we talk a lot about private property and Bitcoin being the ultimate form of private property. But it sounds like that is the theme again here, is that it's not just enabling people to own their purchasing power in a way that can't be inflated away or confiscated, but now it's enabling this internet paradigm where people own the whole stack, right?
Exactly.
Hardware, software, data. Does this then resolve a lot of the issues in Web3, like with censorship and
Absolutely.
exploitation by social media business models and things like that?
Yeah, and even a lot of the issues with Bitcoin, when we look at scaling solutions, privacy, anonymity, when we look at getting your funds back if you lose certain credentials with your wallet. Fedi is a great example of this. If anyone who's listening isn't aware of Fedi, there is a monumental shift happening in Bitcoin with Fedi and the Fedi Bravo app. It's incredible. You run your own server for your community. It takes 4 people to run basically a Bitcoin node, and it produces a form of eCash that can be sent peer-to-peer offline. And that is one of the ways that we can incentivize the building of this new internet called Web5, is Bitcoin allows us to have Web5. Before, it was impossible. Every other token that comes out, it may have some good functionality, but Bitcoin actually gives us the ability to own our data, the hardware, the software, and connect to each other over an internet that's truly decentralized. And to speak on that even further, the Bitcoin blockchain is the ultimate DNS holder. If we replaced the DNS, we would replace it with decentralized identifiers on the Bitcoin blockchain. And it wouldn't be something that spams the network. You can have 10,000 verifications happening with one transaction. And then with eCash, you can actually have data paired with Satoshis, and you can have unique transmitting abilities that are outside the bounds of Lightning or Bitcoin. So all of this is a reality. It's not something that is far-fetched. People are working on the technology today, and it's just not realized. There's not huge marketing departments, as I said. There's not millions of dollars being pumped into user interface. So these things take a little bit more time to adopt, but it's necessary, and that's why people adopt it. People adopted Bitcoin when it was hard to use because it was necessary. And I believe Web5 will be the same. When the internet goes down and we can all still text each other, everyone's going to want that, no matter how inconvenient it may seem at first.
Yeah, definitely. What necessity is the mother of invention, something like that, right? That people don't.
Yes, yeah.
Also, I guess for the adoption of inventions, that people don't adopt it until they feel the pain, right? Until the necessity's there. What you brought up eCash, and that is Chaumian eCash,
That's
I
right.
presume. Could you talk about that? 'Cause you said something else interesting offline, that there's a way that these just describe the design principles behind this, because you said something like they could be making payments to other people even when they're offline and it would still work, because for that eCash token, they were basically the issuer or something like that.
Yeah,
Could you just
absolutely.
describe how that works?
So every Bitcoin node has the ability to produce this eCash. And there's many different types of eCash out there. So when I'm talking about eCash, it's a big umbrella. And I know of a few different groups that are producing their own forms of eCash. However, the important thing is that the Bitcoin node actually produces this eCash, and it can be sent to any other individual, whether it's online or offline, because it is exactly that. It's eCash. It's electronic cash. And so with things like Fedi, we can actually have the dream of Bitcoin being something like cash. And it also opens the door for us to be able to pair that cash with other functionality that maybe the Lightning Network can't handle, for scaling reasons, or maybe Bitcoin itself has limitations that prevent it from being used like cash. Fedi and eCash brings the solutions that we're looking for that.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like if Bitcoin is the Federal Reserve, eCash is the local credit union.
Hmm.
that's producing its own local currency for people to trade without it being separated from Bitcoin, which is the important part for me. I'm a purist when it comes to holding your Bitcoin. Everyone should self-custody their Bitcoin. Custodians, I don't like the idea of it. But Fedi does it in such a way where you get the best of both worlds.
Hmm. And that's being accomplished how? These are federations? Is that
Yep.
right?
So a federation requires guardians for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And the guardians are running a server that the community uses to transact with each other, message each other. There's all kinds of functionality within Fedi. You can buy gift cards. You can see a map where all of the merchants that accept Bitcoin are located. And you can even use OpenAI anonymously. And every prompt that you give the AI, it takes 1 or 2 Satoshis. And so already this concept of micropayments with Satoshis to accomplish a goal like sending and receiving data or getting a prompt from an AI, that's already being implemented into Fedi. And it's exciting.
Where does AI fit into this picture?
Yeah, AI is a big conversation. In my opinion, the reason we need Web5 is because of AI. AI is going to change everything. And it already is starting, but it's only going to, again, gradually then suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
It's only going to grow as time goes on. And some of the issues, such as verifying the identity of a bot versus a human, Twitter has that problem all the time. They haven't been able to figure out a solution, right? Verifiable credentials and DIDs will allow you to be able to see who is a bot and who is a real flesh and blood human being. You'll be able
how
to.
does that work?
Yep.
Yeah.
So AI can't do certain things that I can.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to 7-Eleven and buy something, that's something that AI can't do. The GPS route that I took, AI can't do that. So you'll be able to look at an account and based on the metadata, determine whether or not that's human or an AI. You'll also be able to look at the server in which that data is hosted on. And everything that is produced from these Bitcoin nodes are cryptographically signed with your verification attached. So if a deep fake were to be released of me saying something I would never say or doing something I would never do, I could prove where that content originated from without it being a privacy violation. Because the alternative would be mandatory human verification for everything that happens at all times. And the reason I say that is because with deepfakes, it's bad now. But when you're scrolling through Instagram and every single post is an AI generated piece of content and you can no longer tell fiction from reality, when all of your friends are calling and it sounds like them and it looks like them and it's not them, people will be clamoring for a solution. The internet will be mired in total illusion.
Wow.
We need a way to be able to determine what is true, what is false, what is a real flesh and blood human being. And one of the reasons why the CBDCs will be so widely adopted is your bank isn't going to risk doing business with an AI. How are they going to verify who you are? And I believe that the most elegant solution is for everyone to hold their identity, their data, and their money. And that can be accomplished with a Bitcoin node.
So like this is another angle on Bitcoin is truth, right? If it's this means by which we prevent the illusory internet you're describing.
Exactly.
Something that maintains the the truthfulness of digital interactions,
Mhm.
communications. How is that balanced then with privacy, security, these other things?
Yeah.
Because
So
I
right
imagine there's
now,
got to be some trade-offs in there, right?
yeah, there might be some friction, but you're going to want that if AI is attacking your network and hacking into all of your devices. That's one of the issues with Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, that's one of the issues with the internet today,
Mhm.
is that everyone is connected to everyone. And so the moment I plug in my router, I'm getting hit with 3,000 attacks a day trying to find a vulnerability. The only reason that's happening is because everyone's connected to everyone all the time.
Mhm.
In Web5, your node would connect to another node that you trust.
It's
If
like a
some
trust, circles of trust versus just many to
exactly.
many.
And it may be free for me to send information to my neighbor. There's
Mhm.
probably no cost to that. But sending information across the country, there may be some nodes that that information needs to travel on to get there. And that's where it would cost. And so imagine AI attacking your network.
Mhm.
It can do so easily. It can attack everybody at once. It can do it nonstop every day. Imagine if AI needed a Bitcoin balance to be able to attack your network. And
Mhm.
imagine if you got rich off that. It's hitting your node 50 times a day, and every single time you get some micro eCash payment
Mhm.
or lightning payment, whichever one it eventually will be. And so it solves problems that even big tech hasn't solved yet. They haven't figured out a way to keep us safe from bad actors with AI. And with AI growing so fast and being forced into the products that we use, Microsoft Recall, Apple Intelligence, big tech is accelerating the rollout of AI in a really big way. And it's concerning because again, that AI lives on someone else's computer.
Mhm.
One of the devices that we're working on, one of the projects that my team and I are working on currently, is an AI that lives on a server in your home.
Mhm.
And it manages all of your smart products. And if the internet were to go down, that AI would just keep going, no problem. Everything in your house works. Right now, if you lose internet connection because you forgot to pay your bill or a tree fell down on some wires, your Alexa unit won't even respond to you if you say, "Hey Alexa." If you try to talk to Siri with the internet down, you've got nothing. With a AI that is in your home, under your control, that you can pull the plug on, that is a safe AI.
Mm.
That's a private AI. That AI can manage your day-to-day tasks and your data without causing you an unnecessary risk for that data being given to somebody else, stolen, etc.
Is this an proof of work obviously was invented to prevent spam
Yep.
or to mitigate spam at least. It sounds like that's the same principle at play here as to prevent this
Yeah.
yeah, these
What Bitcoin did for your money, Bitcoin is now going to do for your data and your identity with Web5
interesting. And again, because data and money are becoming unified in this
on chain.
yeah.
Yep.
And so then do you take this all the way to the extreme that all data flowing across the internet will be in this paradigm, this Web5 paradigm?
That's something I can't know for sure.
Yeah.
I think so
Yeah.
because the moment that someone is told, hey, run this Bitcoin node and receive payments
Yeah.
for routing traffic from point A to point B, I think the same thing that happened with Bitcoin mining will take place.
All right.
Right? People said, "Oh, if I plug in a computer, I get paid." Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. 2 computers, 4
Mhm.
computers, please.
Mhm.
I need as many computers in as many places as possible.
Does every internet connected device then start to participate in this?
This is the grand vision for Web5.
Mm.
It's why it will be so attractive to even big tech. If they had the ability to make money off of our data before, these devices are even more invasive. They're even more granular, right? You're living in a panopticon of data and surveillance. And so that's one of the reasons why we need Web5. We need Web5 so that we can take ownership of our data and have privacy and security once again, because slowly we've been losing that thanks to the internet. I mean, people take photos of everything they eat. Hey, I mean, like, we literally are putting everything that we have out there in public, and we're signing user agreements, which are contracts. If you say yes to a user agreement, that is a contract between you and a third party. That is not just a, for legal purposes. That is literally saying you can sell who I am and I get nothing, right? We're being robbed, essentially, because that is our data. At least if we were being paid for it, it could be somewhat justifiable. But I haven't met anyone yet who's gotten a paycheck from their data, unless it's been on a platform that, again, they don't own. X, Twitter, stuff like that.
Yeah, someone posted recently, I think it was an Adobe user agreement.
Yeah.
And obviously many people use PDF at least. And apparently Adobe in the user agreement it said they had an unrestricted, all-time ownership agreement over all data that was ever touched a PDF, basically. And it's like, wow, that seems like kind of a rich benefit for just letting me handle a document. It's like, can't the service just let me handle the damn document without taking everything that's in every document that I've ever used?
Yeah, and in the internet, your data is gold. If you want to talk about the currency of the internet, it's data, right? So merging Bitcoin with your data is just an obvious next step because it's already valuable.
Yeah.
So our vision is, in the future, everyone will use products that are open source. And we're working on a software stack that allows you to collect your data, all your metadata. The AI will show you where you've been all day and all the data points and what you've done that day. You get to edit what it is that you don't want the world knowing. And then once it's packaged, you get to sell at auction this verifiable data, this data that has value added to it, because AI is also about to run out of data. Now, what I mean by that is we've been feeding AI Wikipedia. We've been feeding it all the data from all of our social media. And little by little, people are taking away that data from the training models through copyright infringement laws and DCMA requests, things of that nature. And so we're losing the amount of data that AI is training on. At the same time, AI is about to hit a brick wall as far as data that's had access to from the past for like all of these different types of platforms. Like once it's consumed all the data on the internet, that's it. The only data that's left is what you and I create today. So our data, which was already valuable, is now about to explode in value thanks to AI training. It needs more data. It needs more data than we're currently creating today, which is going to force these companies to find new inventive ways to take our data. And if we can secure it, package it, and then sell it, or keep it private if we want to do that, that to me sounds like the best scenario moving forward.
Do you want to give your kids a foundation of freedom, an understanding of Bitcoin, and a healthy skepticism of government? Then you should try Tuttle Twins. Tuttle Twins is a cartoon about a grandma with a time-traveling wheelchair who takes her grandkids on hilarious adventures to learn about economics and freedom. Think the Education of Magic School Bus meets the comedy of The Simpsons. With Tuttle Twins, your kids will learn about Bitcoin from Satoshi Nakamoto, civil disobedience from Harriet Tubman, natural rights from John Locke, and how to destroy the economy from Karl Marx. Today, Hollywood greenlights a lot of woke content or mindless garbage. Each episode of Tuttle Twins is parent-funded, parent vetted, and only released when it is parent approved. Because Tuttle Twins is fan funded, it was the world's first kids show to teach about Bitcoin. That episode alone has been seen by over 40 million people and was tweeted by Michael Saylor. You can watch episodes of Tuttle Twins for free right now, and if you like what you see, you can watch dozens of Tuttle Twins episodes when you subscribe to the Angel Studios app. So go to angel.com/breedlove to discover Tuttle Twins today. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. Talked about identity and Web5 earlier, but you have here other things like medical records, plane tickets.
Yeah.
You mentioned titles earlier as well. What is the impact of Web5 on some of these?
So health is something that we should also take into our control.
Mhm.
We should be able to control our bodies, right? If we have ownership of our data and our identity and our metadata, then we should also have control of what we put into our bodies and just have autonomy, sovereignty, those concepts. Right now, our health records are not under our control. That's a really big problem. If you go to the doctor and you fill out all of this paperwork, they take all that paperwork and they sell all that data. We should be able to hold our data in wallets that we own. And just like I described with the verifiable credential, we can show that data, but then we can also revoke access after it's been shown. And we have companies that currently hold all of our health information and they share it with other parties. And we should be able to know when our data is being accessed. And if it's being used for commercial purposes, we should be also given a piece of that monetization. So what Web5 does in regards to our health is one, we get to control our health records, but two, I believe that the future of tech also includes products that are good for our health. One example is if you're familiar with the Daylight tablet. Yep. So there's a iPad-like tablet that has a screen that is designed specifically to support your health. And there's it's like an e-paper screen, and it doesn't have the flicker that sends off signals in your brain. I know it sounds real woo-woo for some people, but hey, a lot of people have seen results in switching over to this type of device. I personally am doubtful about how healthy these Wi-Fi signals are for us.
Oh, for sure.
I'm definitely concerned about swimming in Wi-Fi all day.
I can attest to that just on my personal health journey, but like working with a biohacker for the past year, one of the things he had me do was check the EMF of my environment. And one of the things that was definitely bothering me was sitting in my office with a Wi-Fi router behind me. When I removed the wireless distribution and just did hardwire, it was a significant improvement.
Yep.
Also helped getting it out of the bedroom, helped with sleep as well.
Right. And so with Web5 technology, part of the solution that Web5 brings is new ways to connect with each other that doesn't require harmful radiation or screens that flicker with these lights. And I'll give you some examples. there is a form of data transmission that uses light bulbs that is faster than Wi-Fi. Your laptop has a USB stick plugged into it that can read data from the flicker of your light bulbs. And it's private because light doesn't go outside the house. Someone can't stand outside your house and just hack into your system, right? So the designs that people are putting into place for enhanced communication between devices, it's also enhancing the ability to decide which devices we want in our home, especially when it comes to smart home devices. If you have certain types of light bulbs, certain types of routers, certain types of coffee makers and refrigerators, all of that is emitting Wi-Fi now. All of that is emitting Bluetooth and other types of radio signals that we can't necessarily see. And so part of the move to Web5 and a mesh network is things are faster and more secure because you're dealing with local connections and you are in control of the hardware as well as the software. You get to decide what that device is doing and what signals it's putting out. That would be the next revolution, I believe, with hardware. And that's why we're making our own hardware. We're seeking to make our own hardware, is because we want to be able to give people the options to turn off these functions. And the reason we don't have that function now is because they get more data if it all stays on. That's why when you turn off your Wi-Fi or your Bluetooth on your phone, it doesn't really turn off unless you go in the settings. You can't take the battery out of your phone because it's working in the background all the time. There's all we can go deep into the hardware side and the connectivity side, but holding your own health records and then also using technology that's better for your health, that's the goal. Yeah.
Very cool. So, Web4 P2P technology, is that something we've already touched on this, haven't we?
Yeah, we have, but I've got here a demo that I can show you.
Okay.
So this is something that we've developed in Austin. And this is a mobile Bitcoin node. This is a Bitcoin node in a lunchbox. And it also has a private and secure open source cloud in it. So imagine if you went to Burning Man and everyone is setting up base camp and people don't have cell service. Your devices are basically bricks. You can't even play games if you don't have cell service these days. Well, this puts out a mobile Wi-Fi router. You open up the box. You remove the Wi-Fi. You turn the Bitcoin node on. And now there's a website being broadcast from this Wi-Fi device that allows you to be able to communicate with your friends off-grid with no internet connection, peer-to-peer, using a mesh network. And if you have Starlink, you can plug that Starlink into the router, and now you have internet for everybody around you who is within reach of this device. If you have a mesh network Wi-Fi router system, you can do 5,000 square feet of internet for everybody there, with or without an outside connection. Even without any internet connectivity, the server that's in this box will produce a website that you can use for sharing video, audio, files, anything that you can imagine. And if you have people who are going deep into the woods, or maybe they're going across the playa to go look at things, there's also these mesh-tastic devices which communicate to the Web4, Web5 Bitcoin node. This is really what we mean when we talk about Web5 and Web4 working together, is it gives you all of the benefits of the internet, but sovereign, under your control, and it can never be turned off. You can carry around your entire DJ library and DJ from anywhere with this. And in the future, when Web5 is fully alive and people are receiving value for sending traffic from node to node, this mobile node will be able to be deployed in places where there are not a lot of saturation of nodes. And now you are collecting even more transactions by relaying traffic from one node to the other in places that are maybe more rural, not necessarily in a city.
Hmm. So then is that the vision for mesh networks is a lot of devices like this interconnected.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then signals can just hop from across the mesh basically, so that the mesh network becomes the internet in a way.
Exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah. If anyone here is familiar with Tor, it's very similar. People run a server and those servers are connected. It still travels through regular internet lines, but that's because Web4 hasn't been built yet.
Yeah.
Once we have hardware and connectivity that we own and operate, we'll be able to really utilize these networks to its fullest potential. Another example of that would be a television device that we're working on. So this would be an alternative to Apple TV or Roku. You plug this Bitcoin node into your television and you run all of your media through it. It aggregates all of the media on the web, and you can also sign into your streaming services. You can do anything with this device. Anything a computer can do, this can do, because it is a Bitcoin server. It is a Bitcoin node. And so if you can imagine every television in America having one of these plugged into it, we would have that mesh network. And many of these networks could be wired. It doesn't have to be Wi-Fi. It could be laser. It could be LoRa. It could be ESP32. There's so many different ways to communicate. If every Bitcoin node was running a Meshtastic device near it, plugged in, Bitcoin could never be turned off. And transactions would be able to propagate anywhere and everywhere.
Wow.
I recently had someone ask me about if you had an army person out in the field and they were sending messages back to their wife, what would that look like? And what that would look like is we have a bunch of guys using graphene phones, and those soldiers would all communicate to each other for free on a mesh network, phone to phone, peer to peer. And one of those guys would have a satellite connection or some kind of connection out to the rest of the world. And that's where the fees kick in. You would select your contact on your phone, see how much the fee would be, kind of like sending a Bitcoin transaction. That soldier would send the message, the photo, the whatever, and it would travel through this mesh network from satellite to some location nearby where his wife lives. And then it would travel over mesh network to his wife. So it doesn't need to be just mesh all the time. Obviously, there's oceans, there's all kinds of places where this isn't totally feasible. But the ability to send traffic and receive traffic from anywhere, or at least if you're nearby, being able to communicate peer to peer, that really unlocks the internet as far as our ability to communicate without a third party being involved. And that's why the internet service providers would run nodes on satellites and other places to be able to take these transactions and make the internet more robust.
Or one of the most important things about Bitcoin clearly is that it is open source software.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're describing here, I would presume, is also open source software.
Yeah. In our opinion, if it's not open source, it's not Web5.
Okay, so this is an open source Bitcoin enabled internet.
That's right.
Decentralized Bitcoin enabled internet.
And for those listening, if you're not aware, email is open source. The internet started open source. It became proprietary, right? It doesn't matter if you use Google email or Yahoo email. The protocol allows everyone to communicate. It's only the platforms and what's running on the server that's proprietary.
Just the application layer that's proprietary.
And there's a graveyard of open source projects that, because of Web5, they're going to come back. They're going to become alive like Frankenstein. We've gone through the graveyard and made notes of which protocols, which technologies no one is developing, no one's using, but they worked on it maybe for a few years and then just faded out because they didn't have Bitcoin, or Bitcoin wasn't mature enough at the time to be able to utilize those open source protocols.
So this graveyard of open source protocols, those models just weren't economically viable without
Bitcoin.
the microtransactions of Bitcoin, or what is it?
Yeah, the decentralized network,
Okay.
the blockchain itself, the microtransactions, I mean, all of it, people running software on their phones. Bitcoin has really incentivized a lot of this open source development because now there's a model, right? If you're working in open source, what you're selling is services and convenience. And so now you've got Satoshi Nakamoto releasing this open source money. Everyone's contributing to it. And as they contribute to it, Bitcoin is worth more. As the network grows, I've personally always looked at Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin as a sign of where the network is at. If the network grows, more people are using it, Bitcoin gets bigger. If the network shrinks, less people are using it, Bitcoin gets smaller, right? And so the incentivizations that exist within Bitcoin is the right foundation for a lot of these things that we were talking about, the open source graveyard, for those things to flourish. Certain things that I'm personally excited about is we've been looking at the Wildland protocol. Most people here have never heard of it. Go ahead and take a look. It's fantastic. Thank you to all the developers who have been working on that. I believe that that is necessary for Web5. It deals with decentralized file storage. Essentially, you have trusted nodes. You have people you trust that you're connected to with your Bitcoin node. You can hold files that are decentralized on their nodes so they can't read the file, but your node can resolve that file. It's a fantastic protocol. Hasn't caught on. I wonder why.
That reminds me, what was it LimeWire that did something similar back in the old days of the internet that would break media files like a movie or a song into multiple pieces?
Torrents.
Yeah, torrents, right? Yeah. So is that a similar structural model?
Yeah. In fact, TBD, Jack Dorsey's company, is using BitTorrent as one of their DID resolvers. So that's actually right on there. Like I said, when I talk to people who are professionals in IT and computing, often they will say, "Oh, well, you're just describing Web 1, right? All these ideals and all the technology, we've had this forever." And I'm like, yeah, but we haven't had Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is what's going to power these technologies forward.
Sounds like the completion of the internet in a way.
That's right.
I've heard other people talk about Bitcoin that way, but this is quite a bit more detailed, let's say.
Yeah.
What is the data garden analogy as it pertains to open source software?
So you wouldn't build a garden in someone else's backyard, right? That would be a lot of effort to build a huge garden, and then they can shut you out whenever they want. They can also eat your food. Your garden could just go missing one day. You have no recourse. It's a lot like when we use the cloud. We're building all of this data into a cloud that could just disappear one day. And I believe that what Web5 is going to allow us to do is to build our garden in our own backyard, where we have full control, privacy, security, sovereignty, autonomy over our data, right? We have full ownership. And so I would highly recommend that everybody looks into using open source software on all of their devices. The ideal here would be a laptop, a cell phone, a Bitcoin node, and a Wi-Fi router. That is all open source. Because it's only when you're using open source software that you can verify that there is nothing in the background that is running that is, considered malware, spyware, adware. You are in full control of that garden. All of your devices are a garden, and you tend to your garden. You put effort into it. you should have ownership over your garden.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Never heard that one before. Um, we've talked a lot about nodes today, Bitcoin nodes. Obviously, that is part of the backbone of Web5, basically. This is also one of the most, well, it is not really incentivized at all for Bitcoiners unless you're, if you consider protecting yourself against fraudulent transactions an incentive. It is an incentive, but I guess for non-technical users, maybe that's not so obvious.
That's right.
And that seems to be maybe the weak point in Bitcoin's total network robustness. Is that there's what, 25,000 nodes globally?
I mean, on the high end. I hope there are 25,000 nodes.
Yeah.
When we look online, it shows that there's only 16,000 reachable nodes.
Okay.
But there's many people who take their nodes offline, plug it in, broadcast a transaction. Shout out to Start9 and Matt Hill. They've done an incredible job at making running a Bitcoin node easy and accessible. Umbrel is another example. We prefer Start9 personally. We always recommend people buy a Start9 product. And what's amazing is up until a few years ago, your Bitcoin node did one thing. It kept a record of all the Bitcoin transactions. And it also allowed you to broadcast a transaction with additional privacy and security. Because every Bitcoin wallet is connected to a Bitcoin node. That's how the transaction propagates. So unless you were really enthusiastic about Bitcoin, there wasn't a lot of incentivization to run a node. Recently, great example, Start9, they have a open source AI that runs on Bitcoin node. They have a open source cloud. It replaces Dropbox. It replaces Zoom and a host of other products. It has everything that you would expect from a cloud. I personally use Graphene OS for my cell phone, and it's paired with my Nextcloud that is running on a Bitcoin node. And I haven't looked back. I don't need Google, Apple, Microsoft. I run my own cloud on my Bitcoin node. And that is a revolution for Bitcoin and Web5. That is what is pushing Web5 forward, because if we can add more functionality to the nodes, we then have a new internet that really is looking out for our best interests. Especially when it comes to the Bitcoin miners. If you're a Bitcoin miner, I understand how hard it is as a Bitcoin miner. I mined myself, and you are just totally at the mercy of the algorithm, right? How many miners are plugged in, what the price is. It's like a 3-body problem for mining. And if now miners had the opportunity to also host data on Bitcoin, the network, and receive fees for data transmission in regards to also mining as well, man, that would be something that would bring a lot of stability to Bitcoin as a whole. And a lot of people may be hearing this and you don't know the difference between a Bitcoin miner and a Bitcoin node. I didn't know the difference, so don't feel bad. A Bitcoin node, as I said, it holds the transaction history and it broadcasts your transaction. The Bitcoin miners protect those nodes with hash power. They're not always one and the same. There are some companies that are coming out with mining plus nodes. Those are great. If you want one of those, grab one of those. But if your mining is not what you're trying to get into, you can run a node easily and quickly. You can buy one from Start9 or Umbrel.
What is so this is a pretty compelling vision, I think, of the future, as you just said, one in which the internet is formed in a way that serves individual self-interest rather than the interest of big tech. So more of a bottom-up internet rather than a top-down internet.
The people's internet.
The people's internet.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin is an integral, well, the key component to this, basically, right? It's
absolutely
internet plus Bitcoin plus mesh networks, I guess.
Right.
Form Web5.
Yep.
How if people want to try and start creating that future, and you said the technology mostly already exists, like what's the call to action? How do you get people to move towards this vision that you painted for us today?
Well, the first call to action that I would request from the people who are listening is that you would send this to 2 people that you think needs to hear this vision of Web5. Because awareness is our biggest problem. When I talk to people, the biggest problem that I encounter is they don't believe this technology exists. And so awareness of Web5 is huge. Share this podcast. The second thing people can do is they can visit our website. There you'll find all kinds of information about how to run a node, about Web5. We also have some giveaways for anyone who's listening today, and you'll find that information on our site. It's calltheoperator.org, kind of like in the Matrix. If you want to escape the big tech matrix, call the operator. So you can go there. The third thing that you can do is very simply, you can hold some Bitcoin so that when Web5 is fully alive, you have what it takes to interact on this new web. That will be the currency of the internet, Web5. And that would be my recommendation. That would solve so many things. If everyone ran a node, Web5 could be turned on quicker than if we had to wait for everyone to get around to running a node.
That last one, I think, is very doable for a lot of people. Just hold some Bitcoin.
Just hold some Bitcoin.
Yeah. Polyman, I appreciate you making the trip out here.
Absolutely.
This has been a heck of a conversation. Very, just learned a lot. You know, I've heard these terms thrown around, but it's good to go into detail about what's actually going on. So thank you for that. And until next time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm excited to build the future of the web together.
Amen to that. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.